Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Julie and I tend to make content surrounding topics such as mental health, makeup, as well as music. Today's video is a mental health video. I'm going to speak of my experience doing TMS. TMS stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. It is an evidence-based FDA approved treatment for major depressive disorder as well as OCD. There also is a treatment within it for generalized anxiety disorder, and that is also FDA approved, although not as often discussed. There are two types of TMS from what I know. There is rTMS as well as dTMS. Now, I'm not a scientist, I could be wrong. This is more of the patient information I've received as well as reading some articles. The D in dTMS stands for deep TMS. I believe it goes a few centimeters deeper in the brain and is a little more evidence-based. This sounds really scary. It is not. They're not drilling holes into your brain. We're much past those treatments. What you do is you essentially wear a helmet, and TMS is basically magnet therapy that stimulates specific areas of your brain that tend to be lacking in people who have major depressive disorder, from what I know. The dTMS machine that the organization I went to utilized was Brainsway. Neurostar is a common one that goes along with rTMS from what I've read. So I did a blog where I talked in detail about my journey with TMS along the way. I kind of lost track of it toward the end, but I will get into what my symptoms looked like in my experience toward the end as well as up to present day. So I began TMS around August of last year, and my treatments were all scheduled ahead of time, and my end date was October 10th. So originally I was only doing the depression treatment, which was 25 minutes in length. My appointment times were approximately 45 minutes because we would do a check-in. They would ask you basic questions every single time, the same questions to just kind of follow along as procedural. You would do the treatment and then you would pretty much go home. So they usually were not fully 45 minutes, but that's the allotted time that they gave you for the appointment. I had 36 treatments total. From what I know, this is the standard amount of treatments. I think one of the cons with TMS and why a lot of people don't do it is insurance, because although my insurance company covered it, I did have a copay every time. So I had a $10 copay at the time for behavioral health. It did cost $360. So it is an expense, and I know it's not affordable to everyone, and that it really is unfair and upsetting. I just feel very grateful that I was able to do it. In regard to psychiatric diagnoses and medication, I have talked about a couple of my diagnoses on this channel before. At first I was hesitant because I was interning in a school, but now that I'm going into an agency where they're more open about mental health, and I am not sharing this with clients, I'm sharing this with the public. There are different ethics here, and I am more than happy to share, and I'm gonna freaking share. I have PTSD, I have panic disorder with agoraphobia, and I have major depressive disorder recurrent. I've been diagnosed with other mental health issues along the way in my life, but those are currently my main three diagnoses that are agreed upon by my current providers, my mental health providers. In order to qualify for TMS, from what I know, you need to have a documented diagnosis of major depression. Typically, you have to have tried other treatment options, primarily psychiatric medications, although I was very eligible for this treatment because I tried a good amount of psychiatric medications. Although they've helped with my anxiety and other symptoms at times, they have not ever helped with my depression. So that made me very qualified to partake in this treatment. In regard to medications that didn't work for me, again, please, it's really important. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a primary care doctor. I do not prescribe medication and will not be pursuing that career. I have nothing against taking medication. I do currently still take one psychiatric medication myself. I'm not saying do not try these medications. I'm not saying these medications do not help people. Just for me personally, they were not helpful and effective for my mental health treatment. At the time of TMS, I was on Effexor. It was not helping me. However, the psychiatrist that I saw through TMS suggested I stay on it, so there were no outliers in treatment and she told me I could go off of it afterward, which I did. I've tried Prozac, which is an SSRI, as well as Lexapro and Zoloft. I tried those in high school, and then I tried Prozac a few years ago and had a bad reaction to it. Again, this medication helps a lot of people in my family, so genetically it made sense to work for me, but it did not. So I'm just going through my blog post to kind of remember where I was at. I put down the specific symptoms that I dealt with within depression to evaluate which symptoms I found less frequent or severe over time throughout treatment. I listed anhedonia, which is a clinical term that refers to lack of pleasure or interest in things you once enjoyed, loss of appetite or overeating, although I was currently at loss, lack of motivation and energy, feeling fatigued, feeling miserable and hopeless, persistent negative self-talk, low self-esteem, intrusive thoughts, negative automatic thoughts, black and white thinking, suicidal ideation. I was struggling to function at the time. That summer, my major depression was at a point where I was in bed because I was not working at the time, and there were some situational things going on as well. So I was hoping that my functioning would improve through TMS, and I was attempting to remain hopeful. Next up, I completed a blog entry on August 9th. August 9th was apparently my first day of TMS treatment. So on the first day of treatment, they do mapping. For mapping, what I wrote is that they measure your skull, they determine the intensity of pulses to begin with for treatment. I was not fully aware of how this worked at first, but I put my trust in these providers because I do believe in evidence-based treatment. So they let you pick out something on Netflix to watch. For your first appointment, they put on this kind of nature thing, but then they let you pick something, which is cool, while you do the treatment. And they give you earplugs because it can be kind of loud, but I didn't get too anxious. It didn't feel invasive whatsoever, and it was a very painless treatment for me for the most part. The lab tech that I had described it to me as a woodpecker poking at your head. From what I recall, the specific questions that my lab tech asked me every time prior to treatment were to rate my mood on a scale of 1 to 10, as well as my sleep quality. He asked if I drank water and ate food prior to treatment, and if I had drank alcohol within 24 hours of treatment. You, for the most part, are not supposed to drink before TMS treatment 24 hours before, so this probably holds back a lot of people from it. However, I did learn that you had wiggle room and could have up to 1 to 2 drinks as long as, you had them with food and depending and things like that. So if you have to be honest, because if you come in and you're like, oh, I had a few drinks, you can wait till the next day, but you should not do treatment that day because there's medical concerns. However, they might contact your doctor, and your doctor may not be concerned and deem it safe, so it really depends. You also need to have good sleep for the most part. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just enough hours of sleep and a quality of sleep that, is standard. It doesn't have to be the most amazing sleep you ever had. From what I was told in TMS, one of the first symptoms that tends to exhibit relief for most patients initially is sleep. Quality of sleep tends to improve, as well as energy level. I definitely experienced this. My sleep is a lot better nowadays. I have an easier time falling asleep, staying asleep, feeling well rested in the morning. It's a little different nowadays, but that was a lot better then. My energy level was a lot better back then. At the time I wrote this next blog entry, August 16th of last year, I had had 7 treatments out of my 36 so far. You start off intensely. You do 5 days a week for treatment, and that is a huge time commitment. I understand that that is a barrier, but this was something that I really believed in and that I wanted to pursue because other treatment options had not worked for me. Another question they ask you initially is any changes to your meds. You can drink caffeine before TMS, but you usually can only have 1 cup of coffee prior to it. So again, this is probably a barrier for a lot of people, especially if you're caffeine dependent, but I only had 1 coffee a day, so it wasn't a problem for me. In regard to numbers, and this isn't going to make any sense, but I do want to include this, my pulse power began at a 44. And then within the after 7 treatments, it was at 120% at 53. And my lab tech told me this could increase over time. You have 2 redetermination appointments, at least within my treatment, where they do the mapping again and kind of figure out if your power level needs to change. My lab tech said I was lucky because I only required a low power, so it was a less invasive treatment for me than it may be for others, but it's still typically not as painful. So my mood rating at the beginning varied daily, but typically was between a 3 and a 4. That day I was reported a 3.5, and my goal was to get up to a 5 or 6. My sleep rating tended to be between a 4 to 5, and that day it was a 4. I hadn't experienced any symptom relief, but I was remaining hopeful at this point. On August 26th, I documented my treatments after week 2. For a couple nights, my sleep went up to a 5 and my mood bumped up to a 4.5, which was slight progress, but absolutely awesome. My lab tech also told me there's an 80% overlap documented between depression and anxiety symptoms, so it's theorized that even though you might be doing only the depression treatment, it may relieve your anxiety as well. Although one of the things that happened to me as a result of doing TMS only while getting the treatments was I had mild twitches. They were kind of like this. At first I thought I was doing it myself, but when that happened, they would put more time, my lab tech would put more time in between the pulses, and he would sometimes adjust the helmet to make that better. Later on in TMS, that kind of happened a little more and was uncomfortable, but it wasn't a big deal. I didn't really have like jaw pain or headaches or anything as side effects. On to August 29th, I had my first redetermination, and I was given the GAD-7, which is a clinical scale that a licensed professional can use to evaluate a client's symptoms as well as symptom severity for generalized anxiety disorder. Mine were all 3s. I had the highest score of a 21 that you can possibly have on it, which makes sense because although I had generalized anxiety disorder as a diagnosis as a child and as a teenager, my anxiety severity and persistence got worse in my 20s and persisted into PTSD and panic disorder with agoraphobia. And I am not invalidating generalized anxiety disorder whatsoever, but within those mental illnesses, my anxiety disorder is classified as more severe, whereas generalized anxiety disorder can be severe, but mine growing up was more mild to moderate in classification. This is when I found out that they could treat anxiety and do a separate anxiety treatment with TMS. So this was offered to me and I was all in for it because anxiety is probably one of my main mental health concerns in my life. It's probably my most significant and persistent symptom. So unfortunately, my journal ends with a treatment update on September 10th. I wasn't posting for a while. I will attach my blog down below. I just don't want to get too personal specifically in this video, although I do hear and talk about some of my symptoms and things. I just don't want to be too triggering per se. I was interning at the time, so it was very stressful to be interning full-time 5 days a week and then go to TMS after. Although I did look very forward to having that time for myself, just having a really busy day like that for me personally was a lot. But I feel that I would never have been able to transition into that internship and handle it as well as I was if it weren't for TMS. So my goal of functioning better improved. I haven't gotten stuck in bed for a long time. Even since then, it's something I've feared happening for a while and it has not, which I'm really excited about. My mood, from what I know, didn't ever get up to a 6. The highest ever was one day, it was a 5.5, but I was between a 4.5 to a 5 across the board typically. So it did somewhat improve my symptoms. I felt like I was pretty much in remission from my depression, although it was still a struggle. In this journal entry, I discussed that my sleep improved. I felt tired throughout the day, but it was at a manageable level where I could still function and get things done. My motivation was so low, and that improved over time because I was able to go to my internship. I was able to complete homework and just function in life, which I was really excited about. My anhedonia got better, lack of pleasure, interest in things yet again, if you forgot what that meant. I feel that part of that was because I chose Parks and Recreation, which is one of my favorite shows, to watch while doing my TMS treatments, and I think that helped to put me in a good mood and then made me want to watch it outside because it made me kind of feel how good I felt while I was doing my TMS treatments because I was taking my mental health seriously and doing something for myself. I forget the percentage, but toward the end of TMS, they give you the PHQ-9, which is a depression rating scale, again, clinically done by a licensed professional and evaluated. And my PHQ-9 was in a pretty severe spot when I first started TMS. I forget my exact score, but it went down significantly and I was a high percentage in remission from my depression symptoms on paper, and that was really encouraging. So I do want to talk about the patient care. The organization I went to, and I have their permission to reference them, and I'm going to link their website down below for anyone in Massachusetts or Connecticut who would like to inquire about this treatment. Their organization name is TMS East. They also are on Instagram and have a Facebook page. They are wonderful. even if this treatment did not fully help, the patient care itself made it worth going to. The psychiatrist was amazing. I've seen so many psychiatrists that either have discriminated against me for like the way I look and things, which I can make another video on, or they've been kind of flat and not empathic. And she was very nice and kind. She told me I was doing all the right things. She encouraged me to continue to go to therapy and not turn away the possibility of trying medication if at one point I felt that it was something that I needed, which was all valuable to me. So their patient care was amazing. So I talked about the psychiatrist. The coordinator on the phone, the admissions coordinator, is so kind, so nice. They're really organized there, which is great. And I was so appreciative of her. My lab tech. Oh, I'm not going to use this name. I'm going to protect confidentiality, but I am not even exaggerating. He is the most incredible person I have met in my entire life. He was so kind, so genuine. He connected with me more than anyone. Everything I opened up about, he was more than validating. He was like, yeah, that makes sense. I would feel that way too, and would provide like an example. And it was nice because even though there were ethical limitations, he wasn't an LMHC, like he wasn't a counselor, so he could self-disclose a little more, and he never took it too far or anything. But self-disclosure to me is a really powerful tool, and that's why I kind of like the idea of coaching, because he could share his story a little more, and that's what made us connect. I totally value ethics. I totally wish that we could have been friends. I feel like if we met in another life, we would, but he just, I feel like my mental health improved because I got to see him every day for a period of time. I feel like that made a bigger difference than anything else. So I highly recommend Achieve TMS East for their patient care. I am beyond satisfied with my experience there. They also call to follow up with you. I also went in for a 2-month follow-up with the psychiatrist. And unfortunately, a couple of things that I chose to do that I don't regret doing but were hard to endure was that I did make an appointment to go off my Effexor after I completed my TMS treatment. Going back to Effexor, I made the decision to go off Effexor. I did it with my psychiatrist safely. I went slow, going down on the dose, and it took months, but when I went off of it, I had really bad withdrawals for about a week. Physically, mentally, everything was just kind of out of whack. I also took myself off Xanax finally, which I was on a very low dose, but I was dependent on for sleep for a long time, which Xanax is not the best med to be on again. I'm not a licensed professional, but so being off a couple of my meds was hard. I am still on Lamictal. I'm still on a mild mood stabilizer. I am not currently planning to go off of it. I think that being on a medication right now for me is the best bet because I don't want to destabilize myself again because now I'm in a stable spot going off those medications. Because of what I was going through with the Effexor and things in my life that were going on and the stress of my internship and just all different things that were personal, I did the PHQ-9 again and was in a spot where I wasn't in remission anymore, and she recommended to me thinking about pursuing TMS again. I thought they could do booster treatments where you do about 10 treatments, but unfortunately she told me insurance only covers you doing the full 36 treatments again, and my copays are now $30, so I cannot afford that. I also do not want to commit to it again because I feel like even though TMS isn't like it wasn't this life-changing thing per se, it's not what one should expect. I mean, it did change my life slightly in good ways because I'm more functional, I'm more productive, I'm more capable, and if I go through something and I struggle, I go through it for a little bit and I tend to bounce back. Like if I go through kind of like, I've endured a couple of major depressive episodes, but they're usually shorter than they used to be. They don't persist for a long time and they're not as severe. The suicidal ideation's been a lot less, and like I said, the desire to be in bed is a lot less. I feel like my coping skills have improved and my functioning's improved, and kind of my only issues with that is although it helps me, it more so serves societal expectations, productivity expectations, and other people. And although those are important things, I am still hurting inside. And I think that for those of us with mental health struggles, no matter how much we cope and function and do things like that, our pain and emotional struggles are valid, and that can be really difficult to deal with, and it needs to be considered. However, I think that within that, that's where therapy comes in, and you really have to talk and process and do different things that a treatment like this isn't just gonna magically make your brain snap out of it. So I'm understanding of that. My cousin also did TMS and she had similar results. At first she said it didn't work, and I'm like, you should see how much your perspectives have changed and your coping and your functioning and your patience and just everything. And so she's acknowledged that now. So I know other people who've done TMS and it's been helpful. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel as well. My Instagram is Julie_counseling. My Twitter is Julie Counseling with no underscore. My Facebook page will be linked down below as well. I'd love for you to follow those. I'd also love a comment from a kind place as well as video requests. I will, as I said, link my blog down below, and I will catch you guys on the flip side. Bye guys.